In this video, I'd like to share with you 3 Amazon leadership principles for which candidates report monumental mistakes in job interviews the most. Okay, first principle here, instead of giving you the principle, I'd rather start with a question, with an interview question on this. Tell me about the time when, in spite of your disagreement, you had to commit to a group's decision, to a group's, to someone else's, to your manager's decision. It doesn't really matter. And your answer should be something on the lines of, well, you know, I recently had a disagreement on my subject matter expertise, and I did my best to come up with the data, even with some research studies on this thing. However, I did not manage to convince the other guy, and they eventually, we let the problem, the events run their course, and eventually they figured out, yes, I was right at the end of this thing. Okay, so this would be your example. Which, if you ask me, it would be a terrible example, because in a job interview you have to sell yourself on something, whereas in this example again, they failed to convince the other guy, and even further let them feel it firsthand, let them pay a price for not trusting the candidate, right? Where in fact the question is on have backbone, disagree, and commit. Okay, I must stress this out. Basically, what would a good example of have backbone, disagree, and commit, for the commit part in particular, would be a time when you had a disagreement with someone, you committed to their course of action, and their course of action proved to be right, because as a candidate, you don't have to always be right? But this is how you would add value in a team, right? When you commit to a group's decision because you genuinely believe, hey, yes, they might genuinely be right about these things. You contribute to the success of the group here. Okay, and maybe an honorable mention on have backbone, disagree, and commit would be the backbone test, on which I made a video recently with an example if you want to check that out. Second principle causing concern in job interviews with Amazon. Let me again give you an interview question. A time when it did not get along with someone. Okay, so this would be a conflict question, and basically there is a functional part of the conflict and a non-functional part of that conflict if you want to go the academic way. The functional part of the conflict is where you use a subject matter expertise. You dive deep into the data to find some really good arguments, or you commission a research study and whatnot to prove your point. Right? This would be on the functional side of things. The non-functional side of things is when you use your interpersonal skills, where you basically listen to the other part, listen to the other side, you show respect, and so on. Now, the problem is with this principle is that many candidates focus on the first part, on the functional part, and completely miss the second. For example, if you say you disagreed with someone on some algorithm's performance, and you did your best, you dive deep into the data, you measure the algorithms, you perform some tests, and you prove them your algorithms were actually excellent algorithms, and you throw in something between the lines, but the other guy was a beginner, he didn't really know what he was doing, or the other guy didn't really like me, or the manager didn't really like me, or my efforts weren't always, recognized in my previous role. Okay, so basically how you shoot yourself in the foot would be on the non-functional part of that conflict, right? On your interpersonal skills. And the leadership principle in question is earn trust. Okay, now why is it all important that you show interpersonal skills in a job interview? Let me ask you this. Would you share an office with someone you don't like? Not often, right? So if you'd be the interviewer, you wouldn't want to hire people that you think you wouldn't enjoy working with, right? So a person who is potentially a toxic candidate would be the number one reason for which you would avoid giving them some positive interview feedback, right? So long story short, in earn trust, beware that the conflicts, are both a functional and a non-functional matter. Functional is when you came up with the data, with the reasoning, with the actual reasoning. Interpersonal is when interpersonal skills, listening skills, if you want. Okay, And the third principle that's causing trouble in job interviews with Amazon would be customer obsession. Okay, so customer obsession is a challenge in many job interviews for primarily two reasons. Okay, the first reason is that many candidates have some really dubious business practices in their previous roles. To give a number of examples, a banker would give me a customer obsession example of when they corner the customer into a deal, into a credit line. Or a director was telling me how they sold their business unit for being afraid of getting sued. Okay, so these were truly shady business practices, which wouldn't be in line with Amazon by any means. And the other part of not really great standards in customer obsession would be for more technical roles, such as developers. When you fix the critical production bug and you sell it as you obsessed over the customer. If the customer was bleeding, and you just fixed it, that's not really customer obsession. So long story short, the standards you have, you must pay particular attention to exhibiting high standards. And really customer obsession, not customer support, for the purpose of job interview. And if you want, there's many other companies who took this from Amazon, that customer obsession thing, and many other companies screen candidates specifically on customer obsession nowadays, simply because they realized that it's a great criteria to make the difference between candidates, right? Last but not least, maybe another honorable mention here would be a deep dive test, which almost always happens in the final interview rounds, one of the final interview rounds with Amazon. And there, with the deep dives, you should not forget the details. All right, so you must ensure that you remember all the details as much as possible, or if you actually own that project. So these were my top 3 principles. I hope you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.